Saturday. In the first week when I decided to do this series of Lent videos, I was all gung-ho, and every day pretty much I did some recording. Anyway, life is busy, and yeah, I haven't got the capacity to that. So this is Saturday, tomorrow is the fourth Sunday of Lent, and this, well, I've been doing this for many years but this week I've been bending my brain around like the biggest of biggest things. I've been doing, obviously this has been the journey for some time now, and I'm not sure, like the Benedictine monks, or any monks, that you ever quite get there. But what I started to do recently to try and get my head around this whole like who, what, where, how is God thing. So I'm quite a visual person, and I decided maybe I could try and come to some clearer resolutions or ideas or concepts if I was to make it a visual form. So I'm going to share my process of thinking with you now. None of this obviously is fact. This is based on all things I've learned and heard about, as well as trying to piece together, making some sense and using my common sense. That's a term that we don't really use anymore, is it? Common sense. Thinking common sense used to be like eons ago. It was literally that you all had the same sense of something, as in, you know, like telepathic communication. Anyway, that's completely that's not what we're talking about today. Okay, right, let's turn this camera around so that you can see what I've drawn. Now, I apologise in advance because I hope that this video doesn't make you a bit seasick, because I have drawn some things and I'm trying to hold my iPad over it, and I have to use my iPad because it's the only way I can connect the microphones, because my phone isn't, anyway, it's not a thing I can get a compatible what's it for. So anyway, this is all very boring, but I apologise. Stick with it. I hope this is really interesting, actually, and you just bear with it, and maybe you have a little glance and then look away and just listen, but it's not entirely practical for a YouTube video, I realise. But this is the way of it at the moment. I haven't got some professional studio. I've got a lot to share, but I haven't necessarily got amazing facilities to be able to do it. But that shouldn't be a barrier to me trying to, share some stuff with you guys. Well, hopefully not. And hopefully you won't be sick. That would be good. So starting with God, the creator, at the top. So as we all know from our Sunday school teachings when we were, those of us years ago that went, and from school, you know, the Bible tells us that God created the world and earth and cosmos and everything else. And then panning out to the realm of celestial beings and sons. Now, there's a lot of mention of celestial beings and sons, and God having his celestial beings. The sons, yeah, I'm not sure. We'll circle back round to that. And then we have a thing that we know is called heaven. I mean, here I've done the realm, you know, written it as the realm of souls, but basically realm as in, you know, we think of heaven as in some place somewhere, where, you know, we go after we die. Not all of us think that, obviously, but, you know, that's the kind of the thing we've been led to believe. And then there's the heavens, which my gran always called like the night sky, the heavens. So there's heaven and the heavens. Is that got an A in it? Heaven? Yeah, I think it has. But also I think we could think of that as space. So there's God at the top. And now down here, not intentionally at the bottom, but at the bottom of my picture, there's our little chap, and he's on the top of the world. And he's got, as we think of it, oh look, I can use my little pointy thing. He's got a little, that's a little like one of these. So I used to make these little things, and I sort of thought they were like little souls or little spirits. And so if we believe that, you know, we have a body, a physical body, and then we have a soul, and that soul or spirit goes up to the heavens when we depart this life on the planet Earth. So we have hell and the underworld. I'm not sure necessarily that when these terms are used, or have been used in the past, that this is exactly the same sort of a thing. The underworld is almost like the place where the soul has to go through to get back up to the top. We'll circle back to that as well. Hell, now then, is this a physical place? Is this something that actually we can create our own hell from life on earth? Is there actually somewhere where, you know, souls go that have really cocked it up? Or really is our God at the top, the absolutely all-loving one? And he would have us back to heaven anyway. Now, one thinking on that is that when you're born on this earth, and if you're born pure in form, then how come it is that you can make so many mistakes and behave so badly and do terrible, rotten things? If there is a thing of karma, and you are a spirit that, and if we believe in samsara, and souls are being regurgitated around and around and around, so it makes sense that a new soul starts out as what maybe Dolores Cannon is describing as backdrop people. Oh God, that's a huge topic in itself. We're not going to get into that. But that the soul is on a growth thing. So people that are living in our lives now, that are doing horrible, mean things and murdering people and going into, doing all sorts, perhaps they are souls that haven't learnt yet. The soul hasn't lived so many times on the earth, and they have to keep coming back to relearn or to retake a life lesson, if we're thinking of life on earth as a some sort of a school. So yeah, I've lumped them in the same thing. Again, be careful, because this is not meant to be geographic. This is just that I suddenly thought at the end, oh, hang on, what about the hell realm? You know, we've got the heaven space and the heavens, but and heaven, but you know, there is this in lots of cultures that there's a both these places. Like I say, I'm not sure they're the same place. And when I say place, this is the problem, you see. When we're talking about things like this, we're so used to things being in a geographic place. He is on top of the world. Saturn is over to the right of the Earth. You know, we think of everything in a location. And this is the sort of thing. I mean, for starters, you know, I've put him at the top there, and I'm calling him him. We'll get onto that as well. But this is just me trying to draw something not directly as a representation, just as a trying to sort of fathom it out, I suppose. And I do love my pointy finger. Beep, beep. Okay, next one. Okay, so again, God the Creator at the top of the heap. Seraphim, which is Chayot, cherubim, which is Ophimim, and thrones, Erelim. The seraphim, cherubim, thrones. This is a Christian hierarchy, sort of tier system of angels. These are the Hebrew, I believe they're the Hebrew words, not necessarily in the same order, I think, for the Hebrew hierarchy. And then the next one down is dominions, Hashmalim, virtues, Malachim, and powers. And these are weird ones, aren't they? Like seraphim and cherubim, that's your Christmas card sort of, an angels. These are the ones that, they're constantly around God. And some of these have got, like, I don't know if it's thrones or... yeah, maybe it's thrones that's got like multiple faces. They've either got 4 faces or they've got faces all the way around. They can see north, south, east and west. It's one of these. I think it's thrones. Could be dominions. Anyway, some of them are quite odd. It's not the sort of Christmas card stuff. And then goes down to principalities, archangels and angels. Now, principalities, obviously, we think of that as a, like what's it called in France is a principality, I think, isn't it? The big posh place with lots of rich people and their own little teeny tiny royal family. Is that a principality? Anyway, that word comes up in the Bible. And principalities, but then maybe it's like their principles, as in... like prefects, like at school. I'm not quite sure. I haven't quite got my head around this. This is more study for another day. I'm just trying to get... We'll come back to angels after I've mastered the who the hell is God. Okay, so principalities, but here we have our more recognisable archangels, your Michaels and your Uriels and all of that, Metatrons, and then there's the angels. Not that they're common or garden, but these, and the next one down, you see, I've put as celestial sons. So within, you'll see within this circle of celestial sons, I've put the earth. So I'm thinking that our celestial sons, so these are more God's celestial beings, and celestial sons are this kind of like go-between. Angels definitely appear here. Archangels definitely come to earth. I mean, apparently God's been to earth before. I think he's either here in all of us, or anyway, that's a whole other thing as well. But this is the thing. So remember the little dude with the little soul, spirit soul in him? So this is more thinking along the lines of, well, what if it is true that we're star children, we come from Sirius, or we come from Orion's belt, or we come from the Pleiades? So is this heaven? Are these places our heaven? Is this where we go back to? Or is this physical again, and in actual fact, everyone from this realm? So we're not just, maybe these other places, they are beings like us, but not in physical form. Or maybe it's they take on, which is why we have the greys and the this and that, and some of them look, they don't look entirely human, but they are recognisable as human. Or they have a form like the greys with, 2 eyes and a mouth and a sort of a Egyptian pharaoh, funnily enough, shaped head. So maybe all of these go back to some other realm here. Maybe there's another place in here that is actually the heaven. But yeah, see, again, it bends your brain, I tell you. Right, next one. Oh, and also, I haven't put in a heaven, hell, underworld thing here. Is the underworld literally, if it's a physical place, more within the planet? I don't think so, because it is this thing, and I do work, I work as a funeral celebrant and as a funeral director and a minister, interfaith and spiritual minister. So certainly from what I've experienced personally, just even from what I've experienced personally, you definitely have some sort of a soul, spirit, your consciousness, the life force that animates you. It leaves the body. Now, whether it's going to the stars or it's going to a heavenly realm, like more in here, or it's somewhere, a mingling of these. I do not know. Okay, so this is coming kind of from a more science. Scientists would not agree with this, but I've used the words Big Bang at the top, then first spark of creation, creator source. So imagining that there was this thing, this first spark, this initial forming of creation. When I say creation, I mean literally like the very start of all of everything, because obviously they didn't start with trees and planets and all of that. And I'm not sure Big Bang, that, although I've used here first spark, because I'm thinking of the first light of all, and spark, you sort of think of how a spark can light a fire. Whereas Big Bang is more like an explosion, which could be, and I know there is an element of destruction in being able to create, but that's usually when something's already created and then it explodes, or something happens and then creation comes again. And I think this was the first forming. This was like an emerging. This is like I don't know, when there's a science, I'm sure there's a science thing where you have a cup of something and you put a teaspoon of something else in and it all foams up out. Well, I suppose it's when you put one of those mints in a can of Coke, isn't it, a bottle of Coke, and it all explodes out. I kind of imagine it more like that. So this was, I don't know what it read, whether it was a Gnostic thing. It's likely to be a Gnostic thing that I've come across, that it's almost like there was creation and God, with male and female aspects, was as a consequence of this initial creation. So that's when we think of this God as the creator. What was the initial spark? What was the initial source or first cause, they call it, for God? Because, you know, that's another thing that even the big experts, the big guys, they're still going round and round in circles with that. So Matthias de Stefano, he talks about this thing of consciousness. So whether we're going to call this consciousness, and it starts separating, it's got male, female, it's got everything in it. This is the splitting thing, and consciousness goes from one sort of a thing. It's quite cellular, going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is imagining that there's a different source of creation. God came as the first thing out of that. And maybe God was the expression of this. This is the first expression of this spark, this consciousness, this source, this energy. So God is of that. It's almost like it's of one, but this happened first and realized this. Maybe that makes more sense. So anyway, here's God, and God is in the celestial heavens. So this is all your celestial beings. I've drawn more lines because there's definitely a hierarchy. Your cherubim, your seraphim, all of those, and write down principalities and thrones and powers and virtues and all the rest of it. And then it comes, I've then assumed that there's an angelic realm. So this is your mix of your angels, your archangels, as well as human and ET souls. So this is maybe heaven. But we're not, none of us here. I think these maybe lower end angels can't do it, but maybe angelics can go up into these. Maybe there's a mixing here, but you know, definitely humans and your ETs, they only come into this realm here. Unless maybe you're like a sage, ascended master, Jesus, Mary, Isis, Osiris, maybe dudes like that, maybe they get up in here. Well, I suppose especially Jesus, if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God as well. So yeah, again, this is tricky because each of us have slightly different beliefs on this. So this is just me exploring possibilities. I would love to hear your comments and little drawings. If this sparks some sort of interest for you and it makes you think, no, it's not like that. It suddenly made me think it's like that. That's when it really gets exciting and we can all chip in. So here we are. We have our little dude on the moon. There's the moon, because of course it's always like that. There's our little dude on Earth, and his soul is going to go up to there, and his soul and her soul, these are guys on other planets, and they're going to go up to the same realm. So and now it's forming more of a again, it's interesting how these shapes are formed, because it started off very much as a hierarchy sort of a thing, almost like a snowman, multiple headed snowman, or yeah, anyway. We're almost like a mussel shell now. Right, next one. So trying to look at it in a different format, then it occurred to me about the thing of the Big Bang and how everything actually is expanding out from this centre source. Now they show it in the diagrams as like a cone, a fat cone. But again, I'm drawing this on flat paper, and I was just seeing if I could understand something more through looking at this visually. So here at the centre, so if you imagine that black dot is the very initial point. Now, you know, and everything is expanding out. So that is the starting point and always has been. So there's God in the middle. So that is why God, it made it interesting to me, or it seemed logical to me to have God in the middle initially. And so because God has cherubims and seraphims and all the rest of it in hierarchy, tearing out, not necessarily in a circle form, but again, this circle form is seems logical when you think of the orbits of planets, how things go in cycles, how everything seems to go around in circles, and how there's this thing of expanding outwards. The universe is supposed to be still expanding. I'm not saying this is the universe and these are orbits. I'm just saying, thinking of that sort of process. So God in the middle. And then actually when I was writing God, I did it just the dot in the middle, and then I realised, oh, that is kind of like literally what are those things that we can learn about at school? The very first cell, amoebas. It's probably smaller stuff than that now that they know about, but anyway. So it made sense that the celestial beings were the next band. They were the closest to God physically, if there is a physical thing, because if there is this place, be it the source point of the universe or the whatever, the everything, then they would be the closest, which means that the celestial suns, so in a physical sense that we are going now out into space, celestial suns. Now, then I've put humankind and ET kind. So originally I started only with humankind, and then I thought, well, if there is all this evidence of ETs, then they've got to be in the same thing, because they're actually coming from the space that our planet is living in. So, but then I'm not sure, this celestial suns thing. So if, let's say, there is like a geographic point, which I kind of imagine there would have to be, where this first Big Bang, or whatever we want to call it, has happened and everything's expanding out from it. Are the celestial suns, as they're referred to in Bibles and other writings, are they actually the ETs? Is this where we're getting, in the same way that when I started out on this quest, because when I was a kid, quite a young kid, I started thinking about this. I suppose as soon as I was learning about things like there was Greek mythology and there was Roman gods and there was this gods and that gods, and I'd been raised in a church, going to Sunday school and a church primary school. How have we got this God? And if he's supposed to be like the most important person ever, are there these other gods? So I used to think as a kid, oh, well, the other gods, they've just come from space. And I just didn't, I was a country kid. I didn't question these. I did question these things, but I didn't, my answers always seemed like, oh, yes, well, that's just absolutely correct. Not correct, but that seems acceptable. And that seems, logical. There's some logic in that. And that's what I've stuck to for years. And then it's weird, adult life, I've come back to looking at this whole thing again, and definitely in a lot more depth. So are these celestial suns, are these two realms really actually the same thing? But within this celestial suns realm is people operating, or we wouldn't call, they're not necessarily people, but beings or entities or energies or beings that are operating on a much higher frequency than ourselves potentially. Or is that the same thing as operating on a higher consciousness? Yes, probably is. So I think that's why within here you would have your angels and your archangels, because they can move and manifest between. But there would be some celestial suns, if they were ET kinds, that maybe, they're of a higher consciousness and whatever than just some of us ETs and humans. But maybe this is the thing, this is the mix when they talk about fallen angels and angels came down to heaven. Were the celestial suns that came to heaven, came to earth, were they ETs, but actually the angel ones are from maybe this celestial sun's realm? I'm not, again, this is a big enough thing in itself to try and comprehend, or just try and get yourself to a clear answer, even though you can't prove it yet. I always stick yet on that. So anyway, next comes, oh dear, the dark realm. So we're back to the hell and the underworld, or maybe we're not. Maybe the underworld is just like another process like Earth. But this dark force. So this has also made me question, when did darkness come about? Now I'm calling it darkness, and I know it's a polarity and a duality, but it's mentioned in the Bible, and all other all other walks of life and cultures and religious beliefs have got some form of this dark side, that there is a light dark battle or war. And so because of that reference to these wars or battles, I don't know, again, is this thing where, so the Sumerians that are supposed to come to Earth, there were already humanoids. Humanoids? No, hominids. That's the ones. And then the Sumerians were supposed to have come down, and they were supposed to have jiggered around with our, not testosterone, what's the other ones? Telomeres in our chromosomes. And so, yeah, this is where the confusion is happening between what we think we know from Sumerian texts, what we really know, and trying to place it in time. So did the dark come when, by the Gnostic writings, there was creation, and there was this going back to, well, let's get the picture. Going back to there being this initial source, and then splitting in two, and splitting and splitting and splitting. So we have a separate, altogether male-female aspect, and then starting to separate male-female aspect. And so Sophia, the feminine one, who was wisdom herself, she created the demiurge. That is where I don't believe it's not quite the devil, but that's created. That's when the darker side has started rolling out, as I understand it, if that Gnostic writing is correct. But one way or another, if everything that is said in all these ancient cultures and religions, and pre-religion, pre, what we're calling, there's a whole lump of stuff area that we call prehistory, because they didn't really know. But anyway, usual thing, I'm waffling, try and get back to the point. Whatever there is, if there really is this dark light, and I would say with the people that I've seen being interviewed and in talks and things, they, everything from your Catholics, priests who do exorcisms, to people that can see darker energies, entities. They've had certain things, or weird stuff that happens in your house. That can be, put down to being ghosts, poltergeist, that sort of a thing. There's the jinn, sometimes the jinn, Jinn. It's not just part of Islam, but it's even pre-Islamic times. There's the jinn, and they can be good and bad, I think. But there's definitely this dark light realm. So I've put them there because it must be close to us if there is this dark light. Then I wonder, is the dark light, it's just what I was saying earlier is that when the Sumerians came, apparently they landed on our planet because they were in a galactic battle, and so they needed to land somewhere, and they landed on Earth. Now, there's also other ancient Indian texts that talk about galactic battle. So, yeah. Is that the dark side, or is there... No, I think there is actually some sort of dark. Yeah, there's different forms of it, so it's close to us. It made sense to put that there. And then creator band is on the outside, because if you imagine that, this really is all one thing. It's just that some of us don't know how to, or actually will never, or can never, reach this sort of an area, wherever it is. I'm not saying it's physically in these circles like this, but this edge, the creator, has stretched out from this. So it's like this band here is taking everything from this initial point all the way out, and as it's expanded, this is what's created in between. But this is the initial sort of, what came out of that. It's just blown up. But then I thought, is the order of this right? So I went to the next one. So this one, I reversed it, and I started with the dark realm on the inside. Now I'm thinking about this, I can instantly see a problem, because what I've said here funny, I've just kind of answered my own question between the two drawings and speaking to you. This is what happens when you try to do this sort of thing. Doesn't matter how you draw it or how you think about it, it does keep your thinking evolving. So what I was going to say was, the problem with this that I suddenly see now is that if this was the dark initially, dark would be scraping all up through all of this, because this outer level, remember, comes from the central dot. Now that doesn't seem right. There would have to be some light. Or maybe it's the dark. Maybe it's the dark realm, because... yeah, that is like, maybe this is like the backdrop, people. So here we've got God, central point, creator, first spark of creative source, light, whatever, and starting and expanding out, which is why we have creator on the outside, because it's encompassing and it's stretched out from this initial, and everything has fallen in and been created over, well, crikey, trillions of years, I guess. I don't know. Well, they only say actually the universe is, was it 444 billion years? Or was it 4 billion years? 44 billion years. Anyway, whatever. That's what we think. How do we know? Now, if the dark realm is in the middle, and actually it's spreading out to the light, because the good stuff is the majority, and there's only the minority in the middle is the dark realm. And maybe it doesn't fix here. Maybe this has come from that, but it's stretching out, and this is renewing in. So this is like our backdrop souls that, you know, they're new souls. They've not lived on Earth, so they've got a lot of lessons to learn. Whereas the wiser, older souls that have been around the samsara wheel a few times, they are more enlightened, and they're coming out, expanding out, growing out. We always talk about spiritual growth, personal growth. So maybe actually this is right. Maybe this is expanding out. It's funny, I am thinking about this as I'm working this out as I'm talking to you, because I suddenly see a new perspective. The other pictures I've done, you know, like last week, whereas this, I did it today because I was looking at that circle and thinking it was not right. So anyway, if we are really close, this battle of light and dark, then the human realm will come in here. Now again, I put celestial suns here. So this is all maybe the one thing, if these guys are the ETs as well, that are extraterrestrials to us. But in actual fact, this is the separation. We either are them, or we're all different types, but we're all in the same thing under the guide of the celestial beings. Yeah, there's a lot of things in Bibles and Gnostic texts speaking about this, and other beyond. Interesting stuff in the Quran. This is just looking at it a different way, and still with this separate band of the Creator and the Godhead. Now, this is the other thing about doing this. This is 2D. It's drawn on a bit of paper, and I think I can stop wobbling you around now, actually. Hang on. So, one last one. You probably recognise this. The Kabbalah Tree of Life. Now, I have come across this before in my interfaith studies, but don't seem to have retained any information really about it. And I was reminded the other day by somebody that the Kabbalah Tree of Life, so Kether at the top, so this is where we start, and we end up here, which is Earth. Unless this is Earth and that's an underworld. This is why I've come back to this. I'm not quite sure exactly. But she basically just said, you know, we're starting at Kether, and by whatever route we go down to wherever the realm that we're living in now, and we die, and we're trying to constantly, or maybe in life, that's why you get some people that are doing this in life, those that become enlightened. But basically, yeah, you're trying to travel all the way back up to Kether all the time, or Keter at the top. So thinking about that underworld that is mentioned many times, and samsara, and the Egyptians had different levels. So many cultures and had different beliefs about these levels, these trials that you got to go through. I continue to find interest in the similarities and the crossovers, and there's just always like it's like there's it's like those old stories, the old stories that are still around today, because there is an element of truth. So they may be stories as in myths. I think that a lot of what we have been taught to think of as myth, some sort of not real thing, is actually there's great historical elements in that. And I think there's talk of how Joseph Campbell, I'm sure he spoke about story being the way of transmitting a message or a piece of history or something, that it wouldn't get forgotten, because there's something captivating about a story. And then, of course, as people retell stories over years or generations, they get changed and adapted and shifted. But I think they hang around because there is that core bit of truth. So, yeah. Mr. Seagull's here. I don't know if you can hear him. So, yeah, it is, like I said, this is just me experimenting. This is me trying to find my way through a thought process through pictures. And I think that I even went into detail on the very original one that I did. Oh yeah, so it's funny how it's humankind. So kind as in a type of being, or and mankind and humankind, and kind obviously as it being tender with someone and with animals. Yeah, I wonder why they decided kind was became the same word, but has two different meanings. But it's quite nice that we're humankind. I'm sure someone's made a slogan of that somewhere, or a sticker or a t-shirt. Be kind to human or humankind, or something. Oh, and also I thought about how from somewhere else in space, the Earth must look like a star, in the same way that when we see the planets, they just look like stars, different coloured stars. I wonder if we're the green star. Oh, I hope we're the green star. That would be cool. The circles made sense because it's not linear, but it's still forming it in a fixed place. And I think, but with the circles as well, I imagine like there's permeation. And there are some, if it's to be believed, and there are some that are, there is a hierarchy system, and some levels of that different souls or spirits or entities or angels or whatever can access. Oh, and then also I did like, what if it was a different sort of a constantly, a bit Fibonacci series, if it was constantly spiraling out, and that's instead of these circles or the tier hierarchy sort of level ones. And also in terms of hierarchy, I know we have because of the way power has been gained and used and abused drastically, and it's always a very small minority, so there's always this majority that feels, this isn't fair and you're not really doing it so great. There have been civilizations or tribes or communities where they've had a really good way of going about life, but on the whole, crikey, you have to look at history. It's war. It's a lot of war. But I do think the hierarchies are, I would say they're necessary, and I don't just think necessary. I think they are kind of, it's like it's a part of nature. It's like a natural thing, because I think that they're all, from what I see of the different types of people, there will always need to be leaders. And there's nothing wrong with leaders if, of course, they've got their best intentions at heart for the masses. And I think what we have to remember about leaders is it's not always, decisions they make is not always going to go our way, and we're not always going to like them. But I think if actually decisions can be made that benefits more than less, and definitely benefits the earth. And it's not about people, you know, like you've got this whole thing, these American, what are they called, senators, and they're Republicans and Democrats, aren't they? But they become senators, and like we have MPs in England, and then they know stuff, so they're starting to back things and buy shares in certain things because they know that a certain deal is going to be done, or a certain law is about to be made, or, you know, and yeah, and then suddenly their bank balance is like whoop, through the roof. Yeah, that's the sort of crap that needs to stop happening. And putting profit before the planet, I think, is, you know, how is that really going to profit anybody in the end? You can have all the money in the world in the bank. You can even have all the money and give a shit ton of it to charitable things, and think that somehow that kind of cleanses your cleanses your bad doings. But oh well, this is the way of it. Here endeth the lesson. Enough is enough. I think I've gone on. I've probably made you feel completely sick. I did warn you about that, and I'm terribly sorry. But yeah, peace be with you.